Hey, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I'll just be going over some of the changes I made to the BP tracker. With that, let's get started. So the first change is that I have separated the player controller from the BP tracker. So currently I'm in the player controller. I just call it PC races because this will be the controller to be used for the races. So as you can see here, the variables, there's only the necessary ones. There are no additional functions anymore, and then this is pretty much all the code that exists in the player controller. So the BP tracker and the player controller no longer communicate, and that is mostly because I wanted to separate the player controller from the BP tracker because I wanted to make several different versions of it and to have all the widgets and accompanying components and the blueprints, all of that having to come into the player controller was just way too much code and kind of inefficient. By separating it all into different parts, I now have everything in the PP tracker. The PP tracker still functions the same way as it did before, with you having to drag it into level and then customizing it in there. But now everything exists in here. You can see there's some additional code that wasn't here before, also some extra stuff over there. I still get some information, I think, from the player controller, but that is for other purposes. It's not for communication. There's no more pausing around of things like the max laps, main laps. You can see the lap update is now also being done here. The timer is also being done here. The post race screen is also being done here now. Pretty much everything that used to be done by the player controller is now being done by the BP tracker. And as you can see, also the functions, the save game check, save game load, everything is now being done here. There's an excessive amount of functions. Not all functions carry over between PP trackers. As for this one, this is the sprint circuit. So you can see there are things here like the add cars to array, the get positions, the calculate positions, and the sort cars. Over on the time attack one, those same functions don't exist, and this is also part of the reason. It also helps for the widgets because then you can have specific widgets that accompany the BP trackers, so that, say for example, most of them pretty much look the same. And then for the time attack, you have the gold, silver, and bronze, and then for the sprint circuit, you have first, second, and third. So now you can separate those, and even though the widgets pretty much look the same, the parts will be different because now also on the sprint circuit widget, you won't have to display anything other than, say for example, the best lap time, whereas on the time attack you display the gold, silver, and bronze times just so the player can see exactly where it is that their time fell. And then another one is that I was experimenting with a third version of the BP tracker, which I call time trial, which is actually a time trial. This one pretty much the same as the time attack. The only difference is that it doesn't have the gold, silver, and bronze times, but it does have this additional code over here, which is the timer. Now the timer currently doesn't work as you would think a timer would, like a stopwatch, or in reverse rather. Instead, what I have is a float value that gets calculated at the beginning of the race, and then every time you pass a checkpoint, or every time a new checkpoint is activated when you pass through it, it will add a random number between 3 and 5 seconds to it, and then it will display it on the screen. And then I also have minus timer function over here, which just removes 1 from the timer, so it doesn't function the same way. So you don't get to see things like the milliseconds and stuff like that. Instead, what you see is a whole number that goes down one part at a time. There's also this this function over here, which pretty much checks if the timer has hit 0. So if the timer hits 0, then the race ends regardless of where you are in the race. If the timer hits 0, it pretty much functions the same way as though you did cross the finish check, the final checkpoint, and then the widget pops up over here, and then the game pretty much comes to an end and you have to start the level over. But other than that, it pretty much functions the exact same way. There are still things I haven't cleaned up yet. As you can see here, there's update laps that hasn't been done yet. But then again, I might also turn the time trial into a multi-lap event, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm still busy working on this, and there's still some finality that needs to happen. But other than that, this is also where I call the functions, where it checks the minus time over here. You can see here, this is where I subtract
the one, because the time when the function is called is once per second. So every time the function is basically called, it will then subtract one and then work with this code over here. And then this is also the one that checks if the thing's at 0. So you'll have at least like half a second after it hits 0. Maybe you could cross the finish line. Maybe, I'm not sure. You might be lucky and make it in time. But other than that, that's pretty much it. I'm not completely satisfied with it because, like I said, you have a whole number and you get in milliseconds. It does convert itself to look like the time, but then because it doesn't have it in milliseconds, I'm not happy. I'm still trying to figure out how to get that to work like that. But if I can't get it, then I'll pretty much just have to settle for this way of doing it. The other thing is, because the code sits by the activate checkpoint, is that when the race begins or the event begins, then it will check how many checkpoints there are in the level. So I said there's like 13 checkpoints in the level. Then when each one of them activates, it will add time between 3 and 5 seconds for that. So let's say, for example, if you were to do the math, if you're 13 by 3, that would be something like what, 39 seconds that you'll start off with. And then at the most you'll have like 65, so it's a minute 5, right? That's at most. I think my math is right. And then the problem with that is that because the maps are not that big, I think each map is about at minimum 500 by 500 meters in size. That's the size of the maps, right? They're kind of small because I really don't have a lot of space, and my hardware is kind of outdated, so I can't really do a lot. Say for example, a minute on a race at the beginning, that's a lot of time. So what it did was, I have a variable somewhere here. Is it this one? There's a variable somewhere, I can't remember where it is, but there's a variable that I use. Here it is, minus from timer, this variable over here. So in here, it's a customizable variable that sits somewhere. I think it's in here by the custom settings. Yeah, here at the bottom, that pretty much says that a certain value should be subtracted from the total time to give it a bit more of a competitive edge. And that's also one of the things that I don't want to do, but it's currently what I'm working with. That's pretty much all the changes I've done to the PP tracker. Other than that, it pretty much functions the exact same way. And yeah, that's pretty much where I am right now with the game development. So until the next video.